Welcome back, parents. I'm your host, Jordan Langdon, and today's episode is going to cover navigating conflict. Listen, if you are married and have children, you are often trying to navigate these conflicts in your marriage when your kids are within earshot. That's a lot of pressure, right? We know we're constantly modeling for our kids, and we want to give them the best relationship skills possible, especially when it comes to this idea of navigating conflict, because it's just the reality that we can never get away from conflict in our lives. So we just know that kids kind of mimic what we do, right? And the way we handle things, especially if we repeat a pattern of behavior over and over, then we start seeing it in our kids. And that's for the better or worse, right? So we want to set this great example for them on how to handle disagreements in a healthy and constructive manner. So we're just going to really focus on ourselves, right? Because that's the only thing that we can control is just number one, me, right? I can only control myself. And so I want to give you 7 tips for resolving conflict in your marriage. And actually, these work in any relationships with your coworker, your child, or anyone. Um, but we're going to go over these 7 tips. And we're going to start with tip number 1, which is express your thoughts and feelings directly and respectfully, right? Gosh, we can lose sight of this sometimes, right? When we're married to somebody and they kind of get the worst of us, right? We might talk to them in a way that we wouldn't talk to our boss or our coworker, or a good friend, but we have to get back to the basics of conflict resolution, which is to express our thoughts and feelings directly and respectfully. So when you have an issue with your spouse, it's important that you openly express your feelings and your concerns, and that you demonstrate to your children the importance of honest communication and the value of addressing problems when they come up rather than letting them fester. Oftentimes, the hang up in communication in marriage is actually a lack of clarity, like just clear communication. So, when what happens is when we use these general terms, kind of generic words to explain our feelings or our needs, what ends up happening to us is we walk away feeling unheard or even misunderstood. And so it's so important, even when the emotions are high, that we kind of take a breath, pause for a few minutes, for a few moments, even take a short time out from the conversation to really carefully choose words that accurately convey the message that you're trying to send to your spouse. And I've used this in podcast episodes before, and certainly in all therapy and counseling sessions and coaching sessions that I do with parents. We talk about the I statement, right? Making an I statement is a great way to speak from a personal perspective and be specific and respectful. And so, what an I statement also does is it avoids putting your partner on the defensive. So, when using I statements, you're really respecting the other person, which automatically sets you up for a better chance of being heard and feeling understood. So, let's just go over an example of an I statement. You could say something like, I really feel alone when I'm discussing something related to discipline with our kids, and you're in the room, but you don't say anything to support me. And I'd love it if you could say something simple like, hey, your mom and I are on the same page about this, and I agree with what she's saying. Man, if you would join me in that moment with our kids, just with a simple acknowledgement and agreement, I wouldn't feel so alone in this. I'd feel like more of a team when it comes to parenting. Guys, you see that I statement? It was about me and my feelings and how I feel in that certain circumstance and situation. And it was very specific and respectful. It's kind of assuming the best in them. Like, I know that you're capable of joining me in this conversation, And you might even point out, you've done this before and it was really helpful when you backed me in a disciplined situation with our kids. But coming to your spouse from a place of your personal perspective with an I statement is always going to set you up for more success and really help get around a possible conflict arising. So make sure that you're expressing your thoughts and feelings directly. And when you do that, it helps your children learn that it's okay to express their feelings and needs directly rather than bottling them up. They understand then the importance of clear communication in resolving conflicts and maintaining healthy relationships. And wouldn't it be neat to see your kids just owning up to things and using I statements to really own their feelings in the situation and not be blaming? It's so empowering when you start using these I statements. So that's tip number one is really to be direct and clear in your conversation and use specific terms so that you are truly understood and heard. Okay. Tip number two. This is a tough one. Avoid the blame game. Guys, we do this all the time in relationships, right? Just kind of blame someone else, especially if we've got what we call halt going on. We're either hungry, we're angry, we're lonely, or we're tired. If we have any one of those going on or a combination of them, we can really jump quickly to conclusions and start blaming our spouse. So avoid placing blame during conflicts and instead focus on expressing, again, your own feelings and perspectives. By using those I statements, you keep the discussion centered on the issue at hand and you promote that understanding and empathy. Blaming usually occurs when our collective focus on assuming responsibility for our own action appears to be lacking, right? When confronted with challenges, the tendency to engage in a cycle of blame often complicates resolution efforts as those assigning blame fail to acknowledge their own role in the conflict. Remember that old saying, I don't know if your teachers ever said that, but if you're pointing a finger at someone else, remember there's always three pointing back at you, right? You got your thumb and your finger pointed towards someone else, and there's three fingers pointing back at you. So it's always important that we acknowledge our own role in the conflict. Also, when one person is subjected to blame, they are inclined to adopt this defensive behavior. It's our nature when someone attacks us or blames us for something to become defensive. And that really hinders their ability to express themselves authentically because all of a sudden they're not able to actively listen to you. They've been triggered and now they're thinking of how to defend themselves. And so oftentimes what starts with a blaming statement ends up in a defensive, triggering reaction. And then the back and forth starts. And you've got this conflict that just bubbles up and gets bigger and bigger. And so that person who's been blamed, that defensive stance, kind of that arises from the need to shield themselves after being kind of unfairly targeted for perceived wrongdoings. So I just want you to know, like, if this is happening with you and you're the blamer, it's common to attribute fault to our partners in different situations. It's breakdowns in communication and misunderstandings and unmet expectations or disagreements over domestic duties, all the things, right? But continuous assignment of blame without introspection, without looking inward to our own selves, that can lead to an endless cycle of scapegoating, right? Which always leads to escalating tension, right? Scapegoating is kind of placing blame on one person over and over and over. And we don't want that. So instead of assuming the worst and that the other person has done something to be, intentionally harmful, It may be helpful to assume that your partner is doing their best and to provide feedback that would be helpful and constructive to connection instead of harmful and destructive, putting them on the defensive. And I'm sure there's going to be instances in which, someone will make a mistake and be at fault, but instead of blaming and shaming, it can be really helpful to just approach the conversation from a place of curiosity and thoughtfulness and self-awareness, and then working together collaboratively, avoiding that blame game. That really helps children also to learn how to take responsibility for their feelings and actions rather than resorting to blaming others. And they end up understanding the importance of empathy and really taking ownership of their emotions in resolving conflicts. Okay, so by not blaming and instead using I statements, that becomes part of their regular, vocabulary. And then kids are better able to own their part in the conflict instead of placing blame somewhere else. Tip number 3. Whew, this one's tough too. Stay on topic. Stay on topic. You ever get in one of those arguments with your spouse and you're like, it feels like this spaghetti noodle. Like we started here and it's going over here and back over there, and now it's curled around there, and we don't even know how this argument started or what it was over in the first place. It's important that we keep discussions focused on one issue at a time to prevent these arguments from kind of escalating and becoming overwhelming. By staying on topic, you demonstrate the importance of addressing problems systematically and effectively. It's interesting. I've coached and counseled people for 20 years, and this is just a really common issue for couples where they're like, man, we can't talk about anything because everything, including the kitchen sink, gets thrown in, right? And so we have to start with really identifying, when we get off track and start pulling things in from, from the past instead of staying focused and being present on the current issue. When the whole kitchen sink gets involved, emotions just really escalate, and then that ability to have that productive and meaningful conversation really flies out the window. One of the things that Josh and I decided to implement in our marriage is what we call the 24-hour rule. And this means that we can bring things up to each other assertively, directly, and respectfully if it happened in the past 24 hours, within that 24-hour window. And in the beginning, when we talked about implementing this rule, it was really hard because we actually had a lot of stuff kind of stored up that we hadn't brought up and we really wanted to resolve. And so we did have to kind of go back and talk about some of those things and create kind of that safe space to dig through some of our past resentments and resolve those. But then once we got through kind of the baggage, we were able to come up to speed and say, okay, now I think we're ready to really implement this 24-hour rule, and start, bringing things up in the moment so that we don't end up adding a bunch of baggage that's dragging behind. So, if you're in a position where you feel like 24 hours, like I've got 5 years worth of stuff that I got to talk to them about, it may be worth, going to see a counselor or a coach for a couple sessions to have some mediation around those issues. If you feel like that's not something that you are capable of staying on topic with, and that it could really escalate. But think positively about going back and resolving some of those things with the hope in mind that you want to get to the place where you're kind of current with any past resentments, and you can start implementing this 24-hour rule. It's really, really important to, if you have a rule like this, it really helps to, prompt you in the moment to bring something to your spouse's attention instead of kind of what I call, I like word pictures, but like storing it on your belt like a bomb you might throw later, like a week or two down the road. That's never good, right? That never goes well. And then also staying on topic really helps children learn the value of staying focused and organized when they are resolving conflicts. And they see that tackling one issue at a time leads to much clearer communication and better problem solving outcomes. And that 24-hour rule, if you verbalize that to them, that's something that you honor in your family, that helps them understand the value in bringing up something in the moment versus holding on to that and then using it as a weapon weeks or months down the road, kind of lobbing those bombs at each other down the road. That's just never goes well. All right, tip number 4, be an active listener. I can't emphasize this enough. I feel like in conflicts, especially in marriages, we're always so, desperate to get our point across and to be heard and to get in the last word that we forget about the importance of active listening, and such a huge part of conflict resolution. And a while back, we had Heather Younger, who is absolutely an expert in active listening. She was a guest on our show on episode 49. And all of this advice I'm going to tell you about being an active listener came straight from her book. I actually listened to the audio version of her book and just loved it. But what she says is, number 1, you got to pick up on important signals when you're listening. So you notice where words and actions don't really match up, and you want to show an openness to hear the hard things. So in essence, you need to notice more than just the words that are being said. And then she says, it's important to seek to understand, right? Capturing insights and emotions through active listening helps you gain deep, valuable insights about what your spouse actually wants and needs. And I just see this as having a spirit of authentic curiosity, right? Like truly listening to your spouse because you want to learn more about what your spouse is trying to say. And then that goes on to our next step about decoding. She says, be sure to see a complete picture. And this step in active listening, it's more of a data-driven approach that shows you what is disempowering your spouse, and it identifies which changes are most likely to have the greatest impact. And she talks more about that step of decoding in her book. Then the next step is to act, right? Take what you've learned from your listening and observing and decide what you can do next, right? What the next action is. And then the last step is just connecting the dots with your spouse by sharing what you've heard and sharing with them the actions you plan to take to help resolve the issue or make the issue better. You guys, active listening is huge. If your spouse feels valued and heard and included, you've got a platform for moving forward in the conflict. So practice your active listening skills. Really put on those active listening ears and tune into your spouse. Also, by doing this, your children are learning the fundamentals of effective communication, including listening attentively and expressing themselves respectfully. And they see that open and honest communication is essential for building strong relationships. Tip number 7, suspend judgment. When we talk with our spouse, we are bringing a whole bunch of stuff with us, right? Our thoughts, our beliefs, our backgrounds, our experiences, all of that stuff. But if we want to have really good conversations where we both feel heard, we've got to learn how to hold off on judging each other's point of view. I encourage openness and flexibility during conflict by truly considering your partner's perspective without your own bias and judgment. And you're probably going, Jordan, that's not even possible. And I get it, it's really hard. But by remaining objective and then just receptive to different viewpoints, you demonstrate the value of compromise and understanding. Again, guys, this involves a spirit of curiosity, putting on your investigator glasses, right? Trying to uncover the perspective of your spouse without the filter of your own junk getting in the way. William Isaacs, who started the Dialogue Project at MIT, he gives a really neat trick to do this. And it's very simple. He said, instead of jumping in with, that's wrong, here's how I see it, which is shaming and blaming, and then turning it to your own self, right? He says, try saying, I see it differently. Here's why I think that way. What makes you see it differently? Again, you'll notice the difference is that the first statement says, that's wrong. And you might as well, include the word you at the beginning of that, because that's really what you're saying is, hey, you, that's wrong. You're wrong. Here's how I see it. That automatically puts our spouse on the defensive, and it would put us there too, right? So the difference is using an I statement again, saying, I see it differently. Here's why I think that way. What makes you see it differently? Very simple, subtle changes in our communication can make a huge, huge, huge difference when we are having a conflict. So suspending judgment, it takes two key skills, right? Number one, being fully present in the conversation. And number two, being open to learning from each other, right? So the great news is that when we have this awesome combo going on, being present and open to learning from our spouse, really great conversations happen. And these are those times where we feel like having those difficult, crucial conversations were really, really worth it because you come out stronger in the end. Guys, suspending judgment helps your children learn the importance of considering other people's perspectives too and remaining open to new ideas. They see that being open-minded leads to constructive discussions and mutually beneficial solutions. All right, tip number 6. Don't sweat the small stuff. I laugh about this, but this is a little coping skill I have. When something's really annoying me and I feel like I'm going to engage in something that doesn't need my engagement, and I'm just like tired or cranky, I just sing to myself in my head, let it go, let it go. Like I have to. I just have to just tell myself, let it go, right? Not everything deserves a comment. Wouldn't that be awesome if we could adopt that mentality? Not everything deserves my comment, right? That's just a fact. The other day, I was watching a reel by Eli Harwood. She's an attachment expert that we had on our podcast. And she was talking about just an ordinary evening with her husband. And she gave an example of like not sweating the small stuff and choosing to let something go with her husband. They were both really tired. It was the end of the day. They were trying to put their twins to bed, and they were kind of going back and forth about different opinions about the bedtime routine. And she said, I just made a conscious choice not to press my point. And I did it respectfully. I was like, babe, let's go for it. Let's try your plan. And she explained that not sweating the small stuff and just choosing to allow her husband and his idea to be honored instead of drawing out an argument, that really didn't matter. Like it was just splitting hairs, right? That was exactly what they both needed in that moment. So we have to ask ourselves, will this really matter 5 years from now? Is this worth rupturing my relationship just to stand my ground or be right? Or is this a situation I can let go of and honor my spouse in doing so? By modeling letting go of something, guys, you are teaching your children to prioritize what truly matters and let go of minor annoyances and imperfections. Wouldn't it be great if they just stopped tattling on each other and whining about the littlest annoyance and they just learned to master, themselves and let go of things when they feel that nagging tension or those annoyances building up? Guys, this is a huge lesson in virtue for our kids. By practicing patience and compassion, you demonstrate resilience and acceptance in the face of everyday challenges. So, children whose parents practice letting go versus kind of digging in their heels, they learn to differentiate between significant issues and minor inconveniences, which reduces unnecessary stress and tension. And they understand the importance of patience and empathy in maintaining harmony within their relationships. Doesn't that sound great? I think so. Hey, final tip. Assume your partner has good intentions. Encourage positive interpretations of your behavior and avoid jumping to negative conclusions. By reframing assumptions and seeking clarification, you promote trust, understanding, and goodwill in your relationship. Man, I'll tell you, we can all get pretty paranoid in our closest relationships. It happens. Assuming goodwill is something that can be very difficult for people who have experienced lots of betrayal or who grew up in relationships with people who chronically lied to them or disappointed them. But in most marriages, you chose your partner because you knew their heart. Their intentions were good. It's so important that if you notice yourself jumping to conclusions, like you're suddenly starting to put words in your spouse's mouth, that you recognize it's time to actually ask a question of your spouse. Seek clarification by saying, "What did you mean by that?" Or, I noticed that didn't land very well with me, and I don't want to jump to any conclusions. Can you tell me why you said that? Guys, by modeling this, assuming the best out of our partner, children also learn the importance of giving others the benefit of the doubt and assuming positive intentions. They see that trust and optimism foster healthier relationships and smoother conflict resolution. So awesome. So let's just do a quick recap of these 7 tips for managing conflict. Express your thoughts and feelings directly and respectfully. Use those I statements. Use specific words. Avoid general statements. Number 2, avoid the blame game, right? Take responsibility for your part and don't worry about putting something on someone else. Number 3, stay on topic, right? Avoid reaching back in the past and grabbing something from there and lobbing the bomb at your spouse. Stay on topic. That will help the emotions stay calm. Be an active listener, right? Lean in, listen, put your investigator glasses on and put those listening ears on to where you have a spirit of curiosity. You're really trying your best to look for all the context clues and figure out really what your spouse is trying to say. Put yourself in their shoes. Now, the next one, suspend judgment. If you notice yourself judging them, just take a time out. There's no value in suspending in judging someone else, right? It's likely, we talked about this in our coaching session, it's likely that your spouse, they're already judging themselves. And so you judging them further or criticizing them is like kicking them when they're down. So suspend judgment. Try to stick to the facts. Don't sweat the small stuff. Just remember Jordan singing, "Let it go, let it go." And just consider letting go. Let your partner have the last word. Let their idea reign and honor it and be good with that. And then finally, assume your partner has good intentions. That's so important. Assuming the best goodwill in your partner. Guys, by implementing these tips in your relationship, you not only strengthen your bond with your spouse, but you're also providing valuable lessons in conflict resolution for your children, setting them up for healthier relationships in the future. I say, you're influencing your children, but the reality is you're raising adults. You are raising adults. So when you think about parenting in that way, it really does help to motivate you to do just a little bit better in your own relationships, knowing that you're modeling for them how to relate in the big, wide world. And we all know that relationship skills are key, right? You can be the smartest person in the room, IQ off the charts. But if you can't relate to people and manage conflicts, your IQ is not going to carry you. Guys, thanks for your commitment to improving your marriage and family life. By listening to our show, you're demonstrating that you're open to new ideas and you're motivated to unite your family and lead them in positive ways. So, if this episode was helpful to you, we'd love it if you'd share it with a few friends in your circle, text it out to them, or post it on social media. You could always check out our video episodes of the show on our YouTube channel by searching up Families of Character, and hit the subscribe button on our channel, and then you'll get a simple notification when our next episode is live. I'm going to catch you on another episode of the Families of Character show real soon. Guys, please know I'm always in your corner.